You've probably heard about Jesus as a tender, loving person, like a good shepherd. But there were an awful lot of people who didn't think of Jesus that way. They thought of him as a rebel, as a heretic, as a rabble rouser, making trouble all the time. You see, Jesus was always preaching about lifting people up, and those who were in authority, those who had a lot of power, those who lived in comfort, felt threatened by this. Remember what the prophets would do? They would comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. Well, Jesus did that in spades. One of Jesus' common foils, his opponents, are the Pharisees. Now, these were not bad people. These are people that followed the law very strictly. In fact, they did even always a little extra. These were the most religious people you would have ever known. They were always in synagogue, knew their Torah, knew their Bible. And they believed that all of those good things that they did and their knowledge and all of those things, that saved them. And when Jesus said to people that it's God who saves them, when Jesus forgave sins, it took away their power. And that threatened them. And so often the Pharisees would bait Jesus. They would ask him questions or challenge him, and Jesus was a master at responding. One of the ways that he loved to actually respond was to not respond. To go on teaching and having the conversation he was already in and telling a parable. Like the parable of the son whose father asked him to go out and work in the field that day and didn't. Jesus would tell those parables about the Pharisees, the ones who were threatened and challenging him. Sometimes Jesus, when he was going along, simply walking down the street, would point out how people who were sinful and lowly were often better at giving and praying and confessing and accepting the love of God better than those who were the most religious folk. Another one of Jesus' adversaries become the scribes and the lawyers, these ones who are experts in the Jewish law. And they try to trap Jesus in these impossible questions. Like one time they asked him, is it right to pay taxes to the Roman Empire? Now, this was a tough question because if Jesus said yes, he would upset any Jewish followers because they saw the Romans as oppressors and occupiers and people who took advantage of them. But if he said no, well, then the Roman police would be coming around and arresting Jesus for inciting people to break the law. And so Jesus, he refuses to give in to the either or, the black and white thinking. He says, now whose head is on your coin? And they say Caesar Augustus. And so Jesus says, well, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, but render unto God what is God's. Another time Jesus was teaching outside of the temple, and he was actually drawing in the dirt. And I really wonder what Jesus was drawing in the dirt. I'd be fascinated to see that. But all of a sudden, as he was teaching, some people came and they had a woman that they were holding and dragging behind them. And they said to Jesus, this woman was caught in adultery. Now, the law of Moses tells us that she should be stoned to death. What do you say? And Jesus, he doesn't give in to that black and white thinking. Jesus simply responds by saying, whoever is without sin, cast the first stone. Those weren't the only people that Jesus upset. Were also the priests and the Sadducees. The Sadducees were kind of like monks of their time in a way. And there was one time when he was visiting Jerusalem, he was in the temple, and Jesus had just had it. He looked around and he saw all of the people who were selling animals to be sacrificed in the temple. And of course, these people, as like a souvenir shop, they would sell them for very high prices. But not only that, you couldn't use regular money to buy these animals. You actually had to only use temple money. And so first you had to go to a money changer who, of course, charged an exorbitant exchange rate. I mean, what else were people going to do? And Jesus hated seeing people taking advantage of one another. Like God, who speaks in Amos, says, I loathe the way that you are acting and taking advantage of people, and you would not believe what Jesus did. He made a whip out of cords, and he drove out all those animals. And Jesus turned over the tables and dumped out the money. Said, stop making my Father's house a robber's den. Jesus was always looking out for the lowly ones. He was always giving power to the powerless, evening the playing field, which upset those who liked it when the playing field was uneven and they were on top. And ultimately, this is what doomed Jesus. It was challenging those who were in authority and those who were in power. They were threatened by Jesus offering love and grace, the most wonderful of things. And this is eventually what doomed Jesus. He was arrested for treason and insurrection. And yet even in that, Jesus' act of rebellion, of going along, and of resurrection challenged that power and authority of others and gave power to the powerless. But that's a story for another day.